Hello, friends, and welcome to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And on today's episode, I'm pleased to be joined by Hailey Moore. She hails from Boulder, Colorado, and she recently set out on her own to go tackle the Doom route in the northwestern portion of Arkansas. You're probably familiar with this route. It was created by Andrew Onermaa. It's known to be challenging. And at the time Hailey decided to do her ITT, only 3 people had ever completed the Doom route. When she finished, she not only became the 4th person to ever finish the route, but she set a new FKT at the same time with a time of 2 days and 15 hours. Kind of the fun thing about when this is all playing out is that tonight, actually, I leave to head up to Oark, Arkansas. I'm going to be covering the Doom route, hopefully doing some podcasting, taking some pictures, meeting some people. And so this episode is very timely. If you are heading up to Gravel Doom or you're just interested in that event, or you want to hear Hailey's story, this is a very timely episode. And I hope that everybody enjoys it. I really did. Hailey is relatively new to bikepack racing, so I took this opportunity to ask her if we're going to be seeing more of her on the race circuit. She is not confined to the bike alone. She does many other sports, and we talk about some of those too, namely climbing. I'm kind of a climbing fan, and so anytime I interview climbers, it's not uncommon that we talk about it a little bit. But great conversation with Hailey. I appreciate her jumping on a call literally just, I think, 2 or 3 days after finishing her ITT and new FKT on the Gravel Doom route. We had an awesome chat, and I can't wait to share it with you. But before we get to that, why don't we take a moment to thank the people that made today's episode possible, starting with our newest batch of patrons. First up, we got Rocky, Robert H., Logan Mumma. Oh, I like that. Logan Mumma, Bob Vale, and Chris V. Appreciate y'all signing up, and check this out. I've already recorded next week's episode. Surprise guest, but listen, there's going to be 2 episodes coming out next week. One is going to have bonus content that's for patrons only, and one is going to be for free, and it's going to be to everybody. So if you want to get the bonus content, you can sign up over at patreon.com/bikesor-death. All right, well, listen, today's episode is also brought to us by my friends over at Kuat. They make the best bike racks in the world. I know, because I have one. And I'd like to tell you about a couple of the racks that I would recommend. The Sherpa 2.0 is the lightest, sexiest bike rack available, sustainable for carrying most bikes out there. When I say light, let me break it down for you. You have a beer, right? You drink it, boom. Empty aluminum can. It's light, right? Because it's aluminum. The Sherpa 2.0 is 98% aluminum. This means it's light, and I'll drink to that. All right, beer sold separately, though. You know how it goes. And the Sherpa 2.0 has a handy foot assist pivot system that allows you to gently drop the rack with a tap of the foot so that you can get your bike on the rack without lifting a finger. Now, let's talk about security. The Sherpa 2.0 has semi-integrated cable locks that will help keep your bike and your man purse safe. The Sherpa 2.0 comes in 3 color options: gray orange, pearl white, black and silver, and it's backed by the Kuat No Worries warranty. They've got your rack and your back. Check those out on their website. They MSRP for only $629. All the details can be found at kuat.com. That's KUAT.com. Today's episode is also brought to us by Athletic Greens. I started using them because if you've noticed, food options have become increasingly faster and less healthy. Eating healthy these days can actually be kind of challenging. It can be a little bit expensive. It can be harder to find good and healthy options. And it can be harder to get the nutrients and the veggies that your body needs. So for me, I found that Athletic Greens is a great solution to help manage a healthy diet with
one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. I take mine every morning in about 12 ounces of cold water, and it's a great way to start the day knowing that I gave my body something really good to get the engine going. Now, to make this easy, and we want to make it easy, if you'd like to try Athletic Greens, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/bikesfordeath. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/bikesfordeath to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate in daily nutritional insurance. Alrighty, folks. Thanks for hanging in here with me. Don't forget to support the people that make this show possible if you can. We appreciate it. Mwah. Now, listen up. Like I said, I'm headed out to Arkansas tonight. I haven't started packing yet. I've said this many times on the podcast before. So let me wrap this one up, get it out to all you fine folks so I can get up to Arkansas and get in the woods. But first, let's have my friend Miles Arbor take it away with the Bikes for Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes for death. Bikes for death. Podcast.
You said you never done a podcast before. Is that still true? Did you do any since the last time we chatted?
No, I haven't. This was the first one.
Wow, exciting. That's a good question for you. What do you listen to when you're on, whether it's a ride or like the Ozark Gravel Doom? Do you listen to anything?
Yeah, no, it's actually really funny that you asked that. So typically, yes, I do listen to a lot of podcasts. You know, it kind of depends on my mood. It kind of depends on like how challenging the terrain is. Like if the terrain is like really tough, you know, either a lot of climbing or just kind of technical, I'll listen to a podcast that feels more just like pure entertainment. But you know, that's still like super enjoyable and that I can still get something out of, but that just like requires like a little bit less of my brain to like absorb it all. Like I'm not going to listen to like, you know, a news podcast while I'm like grinding up like a super steep climb.
Sure.
Or if I am, then I'm probably going to start feeling like kind of angsty about it and just like, you know, pause it until the top or something. But especially in the mornings, I find that I have a little bit more mental energy for, you know, podcasts that might be like heavier subject matter. So, you know, typically like the news. I feel like I get most of my news from podcasts. So I kind of have like a daily circuit of, just like daily news podcasts that I try to stay up to date on. I'm not, you know, always the most diligent about it, but I try to like stay informed. And then, I've got a kind of another like arena of podcasts that would fall more into that, like just total like pleasure entertainment bucket, yours being one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's,
Thank you.
You know, it's sometimes when you are out there, it's nice to hear relatable stories from people who have done the same things. And then, you know, I listen to music a lot too. It's like such like a mood lifter, you know, like especially like late in the day or at night. But it's funny.
What kind of music? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What kind of music? What are you into?
Kind of across the board, but I guess I would say like indie would be like a good, you know, general description of my genre. I feel like whenever I get the Spotify like end of year thing, you know, I always have like freak folk as a category, but I feel like I don't even really still know what that is. And then I like dip into like post-punk, but like I wouldn't say I'm like super hardcore into that. But it's funny that you asked about Doom, because that was one of the biggest challenges, was that I sort of made this miscalculation, and I didn't run a dynamo hub. I just decided that I would rely on a pretty large external battery to power all my stuff. And basically by the end of the first day, I realized that was definitely an oversight. And so for the second and the third day, I hardly listened to anything. I think I was
just saving, like conserving.
Saving phone battery. And that was, when I did like, gift myself like a podcast or like, 20 minutes of music or something, it would be like this huge lift.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good question, actually. How did that lack of music impact your energy, your focus, all that stuff?
Yeah. I would say, well, obviously the course itself is quite challenging on Doom. I mean, just the amount of climbing that you're doing, it's typically like a softer surface. But for me, I think what was like the biggest challenge, and this whole like electronics, not being able to listen to music issue kind of falls into this, but I just had a really hard time getting into like a mental like flow state a lot of the time. I think part of that is because, I had never ridden there before, so you don't really know what to expect. It feels, to me at least, like a little harder to zone out when I'm not familiar with the terrain, because you're just kind of like, I don't know, maybe trying to like stay alert. And then hopefully. And then once I realized that the electronics were going to be an issue, I was navigating using the Ride with GPS app on my phone, because I just gave up on trying to keep my Wahoo charged. So that was just kind of stressful, because I didn't want to keep the screen on all the time, because that just really like sucks the juice out of your phone like super fast. So every few minutes, depending on where I was on the course, I would like, have to turn my phone screen on, recenter where I am on the app. I had the audio cues on in earbuds, but it doesn't pick up every single split, like especially on like Forest Service roads. So I just felt like I was kind of constantly thinking about like the electronics and navigation. And then also on Doom, they're given the location, kind of backwoods like Arkansas, there are quite a lot of loose dogs on the course. And, in that area, it's really just like punchy up and down. But eventually you would get to the end of like a section of climbing and kind of like find yourself like on a little ridge for a while. And so the houses were either up there or like down in the valleys. So anytime basically I came on a cluster of houses, it was sort of like, not if there was going to be a dog, but like, where's the dog? Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, I think it was good that I wasn't just like, totally zoning out on like my music, because then all of a sudden there'd be like this dog chasing me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's tough. I've been in a very similar situation on a race. I've only done one. You might have heard on the podcast, a 500-mile race here in Texas. And, I was riding a dynamo, but my miscalculation was that I was riding so slow that I wasn't charging everything I needed. Mm-hmm. And it became a huge mental drain. At one point, this came up on the podcast not too long ago, but someone came, past me on the race, and I was riding back and forth on this Forest Service road, just trying to charge my Garmin so I knew where I was going, and that was it,
Yeah.
And then I was like trying to dip into gas stations and get batteries and try it. That's a big drag whenever there's like an extra mental thing. And like you said, you can't get into a flow state. It's always eating at you. Do you think that made you go faster? Do you think it like, because you couldn't like zone out, or do you think it had any impact at all?
I know I've thought about that because, so at the end of the second day, there was actually 2 longer climbs at the end of the second day for me, which I really enjoyed because, well, one, it's a little bit more similar to Colorado. But 2, I was like, oh, cool. I can just like focus on this climb. And I know there's not going to be any turns like until the top. But anyways, after those 2 climbs, I was coming down, into this little town that's like north of Clarksville. And there was a it was a gas station convenience store that I knew closed at 9. And because there were some kind of unexpected, like fun little ATV sections on the descent, I was like, oh man, like, I don't know if I'm going to make the 9 o'clock, cutoff. But simultaneously, at this point, I'm only navigating on my phone and it's at like 11%. And my InReach tracker had also just like pinged me that it was at like 10%. So I was like, oh man, like I got to get to the store, because like if my phone had died, that would have been it. I wouldn't have been able to like divine my way, because it wasn't like a straight shot.
You wouldn't have just said a prayer and bikepacking Jesus would have showed up.
Totally. But so when I got to this store, it was 9:30. I was like, oh man, they're closed. But the owner was actually like coming out and he let me just like pop in and get like a snack really quick. But basically, I needed to charge all my stuff that night, like both of my front lights, phone, tracker. And I also needed to get dinner, but like the next store was 15 miles away and it was also closed and not opening until 7 a.m. The town of Clarksville itself would have been like a 12-mile like round trip detour on this road that seemed like quite busy. And I wasn't very comfortable like riding it. I mean, there were like these pickups, dragging like boat trailers going like 60 miles an hour. I was like, oh, this seems sketchy.
I covered this race when Brett set the FKT originally. Yeah. So I'm pretty familiar with the area and stuff. And yeah, it's those, once you get on the gravel roads, it's amazing, right? Cause you're not going to see hardly anyone. The traffic is so light. But man, on those little tight, twisty, up and down country roads, whoo!
Yeah,
they come flying.
I know. So yeah, that stop, I ended up just staying like behind that store for the night, like to charge my stuff. Like if I had needed to charge my electronics, like sure, I could have ridden another 15 miles that night and just woken up at the next store. But because like I still would have needed to like wait for those hours to, like to get enough food for like the final stretch, it was kind of like this weird thing where like, yes, it felt like the electronics were holding me back, but I would have just ridden those 15 miles to the next store and then waited until 7 a.m. anyway. That being said, earlier in the second day, like in the morning, I had taken, I guess it ended up being like a 5-mile detour off route to this town called Pierceton. It was around like mile 160 in the course, to get food and also to like charge some stuff. And I definitely hung out there a little bit longer, just kind of like waiting on some batteries to charge. But then I guess like sort of the other side of it, you asked if while I was actually riding, if I felt like it was making me go faster. I definitely rode the final 35 miles, I think faster than I would have, because I was afraid that my lights were going to die. And so basically I started the last 35 miles of the course around, I don't know, 5:45 p.m. And I was like, okay, I've got about, 2 hours, two and a half hours, until it like starts getting dark. And, since Andrew had like thrown in a couple of like techier sections earlier in the course, even though that section started out as like pretty smooth gravel, I was just like anticipating like, oh, what if there's like a 10-mile stretch where I'm like walking part of it, So in that way, yeah, I did ride pretty hard, just to cover as many miles as I could before the sun went down. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, but I mean, that is bike pack racing, isn't it? I mean, those are the things that come up and you can't always control them. And obviously, if you did it again, you can learn from that and bring your dynamo probably. Let's back up. I did want to get to know you a little bit before we got too deep into the doom. So just, for starters, where do you live and what do you do for work?
Yeah, I live in Boulder, Colorado, but I'm from North Carolina originally. I've been out here about 5.5 years. And for work, I kind of do a couple different things, but my primary gig is I'm a freelance copywriter. So, just like brand messaging. I work a lot with Pearl Izumi on that front, just like managing their athlete blog, and then also doing like email copywriting, website copy, that kind of stuff. But I'm also involved in this local race here called Ned Gravel.
Ned Gravel?
Yeah, so it's named after this town just west of Boulder called Nederland. So for short, Ned Gravel. So I do their social media and help out with some of their like events. So
you sound like any other self-employed person. You've got to do 50 jobs, if you want to have, like, I assume I'm making some assumptions here that you have some flexibility in your schedule, that you can leave Boulder and go to Doom. And, you have that flexibility, but with that flexibility comes, at least for me, it's like you're doing 1,000 things at one time and trying to find any way to make a penny and make it work and everything.
Yeah, totally. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. Do you enjoy doing that kind of stuff, or is it more the freedom that it gives you that you appreciate?
No, I do enjoy it. I really enjoy writing. And the thing with copywriting, especially when you find a brand who's like messaging you actually enjoy like promoting, it's kind of this nice balance between creative work, but like not so creative that you feel like you have to be like super inspired every time you do it. There's enough sort of like formulaic, kind of like not, you know what I'm saying? It's
it's I mean, it's the same thing whenever I do an interview. I mean, there's kind of a basic formula, once you get in the groove, you kind of know, what's going to go next essentially or something.
Yeah. But I think I'll enjoy it more after I finish up this online school program that I've been doing. I've been completing a user experience design certificate course online for, I guess, almost a year. And so that feels just sort of like this extra burden of like, obviously I'm not getting paid to do it. Like I'm the one who's paying and, and it does take up like significant time. So,
so are you the one pumping up Antone's Instagram numbers or what?
Oh no, he's responsible for that himself.
Did I get his name right?
Anton.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anton.
yeah.
Or Tony. Or Tony. Okay.
Yeah.
So, knowing you just through social media, I see you're involved in a lot of different sports, endurance activities. I'm curious, what all do you do? It seems like you're running, maybe skiing, climbing, scrambling up boulders, all kinds of stuff.
I definitely do enjoy the variety. And I feel like, even though there's a lot of challenges to living in Boulder, the proximity to all these different activities is one of the things that like I love so much about this place, and that makes it feel super unique. When I moved here, actually 5.5 years ago, I was basically only into climbing, bouldering specifically. And then, just, coming from the East Coast, moving to the mountains, I got more intrigued by like the longer stuff because, I don't know, bouldering is great. It's about like, it's climbing in its like most condensed form. The movement is typically pretty hard, relatively speaking. And also the movement is like the most creative, but it's really limited to, obviously like a smaller scale. And when I moved to Colorado, I was just kind of like blown away by the mountains. And, foot travel and the bike seemed like the best way to get out and see all that stuff.
So you just got into cycling as a matter of like the best vehicle for accessing the outdoors, going and seeing pretty things, or?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I guess I technically got into it through commuting. When I was in high school, I had like my little hybrid like commuter, and I got my license during the recession. So all of a sudden, like gas was like so expensive. And I was like, well, I can't pay for that. So I just started like commuting by bike then to friends' houses and to like my after school job and that kind of thing. But it was like fully, functional, just like utilitarian. And then, yeah, I kind of commuted in college. But then didn't even have a bike when I moved out here. But Boulder has like a really awesome network of bike paths. So I just bought like a single speed from a coworker for like super cheap. Started getting back into riding when I moved here. Because road riding had always seemed like kind of boring and like dangerous to me. And then as a climber, mountain biking just seemed like too risky. I had a friend who broke her collarbone mountain biking, and she was a climber, and that was like her fun activity on the side. And I was like, well, I'm too serious about climbing to like get injured doing one of these other things. So, but then that's also kind of around the time when I think the phenomenon of like gravel bikes started to become somewhat mainstream. This would have been like early 2018. So yeah, I bought a gravel bike and started doing some bike touring.
It's so impressive how quickly, you just set an amazing time on the Doom. I know you did Colorado north to south or south. Mm-hmm. Yeah. North to south. Pretty impressive. We're paint me a picture of like what your life looks like in terms of recreating. Is cycling your objective, and you do all these other things to like keep it interesting, keep yourself fit, keep your mind active? Like where are you landing right now with all the different kind of sports that you take on?
For sure. Yeah. I think I would say that cycling is number one. First of all, when I started getting more into the endurance stuff, I was a little bit disillusioned, like with the climbing community at that time, or like the climbing scene rather, in Boulder, I guess. And also just sort of like what climbing required here to like really excel at it. Like I felt like I was kind of at this like tipping point where I was like pretty good, but like definitely, nothing to like write home about. I was like an upper end average boulderer, but I just, in the South, in the Southeast, I lived in North Carolina and in Tennessee. The concentration of climbing access areas were just so much closer to where I lived. So I didn't feel like I had to like, spend the whole day driving or like, whatever to really have access to that. And I also, I never really got into bouldering as a solitary activity. A lot of people do, and, really strong climbers do that, and they do it well. But, yeah, I never enjoyed doing it solo because of sort of like the risk factor of like, what if you fall and like your pad's not in the right place or whatever. At the same time, I think I'm pretty introverted. And so it would always be like exhausting for me, like going and spending, more than just physically exhausting, going and like spending the day with all these people.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. It's odd for a host, but I'm fairly introverted too.
Yeah.
One-on-one conversations are good, but like groups of people, that's one of the reasons, going on a bike ride and camping overnight is so appealing is, it's just so relaxing,
Yeah. Yeah. but yeah, so I started getting into running, and I love running. But my body doesn't love running as much as I do. And so it seems like I always have some kind of like little injury, little something going on. But yeah, then when I found the bike, I basically got into more serious riding through touring. I had done like some like longer, middle kind of distance rides, but really like shortly after I got my first real bike, yeah, Tony and I just started doing a lot of like bike touring together. And it was really cool because it was something that we could do together. I loved just like the aspect of going like all day. It's just like this really perfect like vehicle for being able to carry your stuff, but also like travel really far. But also like, with running, you're usually like working like fairly hard at it. If you're like running in the mountains or something. And so I feel like you can't always like really enjoy like where you are quite the same way as like the bike. And so, yeah, I guess it was just kind of like that combination of things. And to answer your original question about like, how do I kind of fit all these things together and balance them? I ask myself that a lot. But, I feel like it kind of goes like cyclically, like I'll have like a couple of goals on the bike. And that means that, okay, well, maybe I'll just run like 2 days a week because it's more time efficient than riding every day, first of all. But also like just to kind of keep a little bit of that, like, muscular skeletal, like resiliency that like running like really seems to require. And then
I don't run, so I don't know.
well, it's just like the impact. I feel like there's just so much more going on when you're running. And like those muscles like need more specific like conditioning, like I feel like if I take time off the bike, I definitely feel it, but I feel like I can come back faster. And then with climbing, it's really just like for fun for me. Like I don't have enough mental, emotional capacity to like care about continuing to progress at climbing like at this moment alongside like endurance activities. It's not to say that wouldn't change, down the road or for like a specific objective. But right now, I just sort of, it took a while, but I kind of had to let go of like how much I cared about, feeling like I was a good climber. And now I just do it because, yeah, I enjoy it.
So are you competitive? Are you competitive with yourself, with other people?
I mean, I think I would say I'm competitive with myself more so. I mean, I haven't done like a ton of races,
Yeah, but even the way that you're talking about bouldering, you're talking about it like how, like, I mean, you seemed like competitive, or you cared a lot to do well at it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, where does that come from?
Yeah, I know. So with bouldering, it's a little bit different, I think, from the bike because bouldering is climbing is so much more technical. There's this, so how familiar are you with bouldering? Do you understand like the problems, and you send the problem and there's like the grading scale of difficulty?
Yes, I got all that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a huge fan of climbing. I watch every single climbing documentary I can find on the Netflix. I'm huge, like, Tommy Caldwell or Honnold or whoever. I mean, I follow the sport. I'm personally like kind of afraid of heights and don't want to, I don't know. I've done a little climbing, but
no, before I got like too jargony, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I think I can keep up. I think so.
I'm sure you're fine. But no, with bouldering, there's this feeling of satisfaction, like unlike anything I've experienced, that I would get when I would climb something like perfectly. you just feel it's this really intense, kind of short-lived little flow state where you don't even think about like the movement. It's just like happening. And it's like, especially after you've thought about the movement for so long, like so many like attempts, like so many times that you feel like you've rehearsed the moves. And so when you finally like send the problem, especially if it, if it feels like kind of this, it just feels like you're floating, like when you do it right. And I think that feeling of flow, that feeling of success, like that feeling of, this was kind of a bird walk, but I listened to this really interesting podcast with Jeff Tweedy the other day, and he describes.
I'm going to write that down. I've never heard of him.
He's the lead singer of Wilco, the band.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah,
Emily that works for me, she's a huge Wilco. I've never heard of them, but I know she's going to a concert soon. Anyway.
Yeah, but he described the feeling of flow as like a disappearing from your body. And I just think that, as humans, we spend so much time, or I spend a lot of time just like hyper aware of, of myself, of like my doubts, like of my insecurities, of whatever. And I think when you tap into that, like that flow state or that disappearing state, it's just like this little micro like meditation. And on the bike, I experience that the most, or the times that I've experienced it have been definitely during longer rides. And it's just like this feeling kind of sets in where like, it literally doesn't matter what the terrain is. You could be climbing, forever, and like your body will just like do it.
What I think I'm learning about you, and what's important to tell people that maybe aren't familiar with climbing, is what's really impressive about any kind of climbing. It's not when you hit flow state. Well, maybe that is, but for me, the most impressive thing is how many times a climber will try a problem, and maybe they'll come back to that problem every season, once a year for many years, and they will spend a weekend or a week working one problem for the luxury of being able to do it once in a flow state. Like that's a really telling thing about a person. Like, yes, you are doing bouldering, and yes, that one moment may be somewhat condensed, but I mean, you're coming across to me as an endurance athlete. Like that's an endurance effort. You have to be mentally motivated inside yourself. You have to be internally motivated to keep trying. I mean, you fail and you fail and you fail, which is a great thing. The sooner you can get used to failure and then learning how to like work through that and overcome it. I mean, it's one of the most valuable things I think as humans we can really learn. So it sounds like that's, I don't know, you tell me, but I guess what I was kind of getting at with all this is I'm curious how all of these different disciplines help you in bike pack racing or.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely agree. I've always been, even when I was solely focused on bouldering, I was always attracted to, long days of movement. And so with bouldering, sometimes I would just go out. So funny, we're just turning this into a climbing podcast, but sometimes I would go out and have like what I would call like a circuit day, and you do a lot of problems that you've done before, but you just get like really high volume. But anyway, so yeah, when I found like the bike, and occasionally with running when my body allows it, those like really long days are definitely like what I find to be the most fulfilling. But, I think I'm attracted to activities that have like a problem solving element. Obviously that's really prominent in climbing, but I think with bike packing, obviously that's also a component. And like, I'm definitely like kind of like a planner. I like to be organized, I like to like know what to expect. And so I think that part of my personality also plays nicely with bike packing, in that, it's enjoyable for me to kind of like try to map out like, what I'm going to need and like how far I can get. And if I don't get this far, then what's plan B? And at the same time, I think that, bike packing and touring has taught me to be like a little bit less like rigid mentally, and not get like bent out of shape if something doesn't go how I think it should go or how I expected it to go. And so, I don't know. I guess I feel like, it's the more analytical side of me like plays into bike packing, but it's also like helped me be a little more relaxed too.
I had this observation after doing these podcasts for a little while. There's a lot of engineers that are attracted to bike packing, and it's pretty obvious. It's a puzzle. This is a huge puzzle. It's, your fitness, your diet, your mental, all the logistics that you're talking about, your equipment, your gear, it's everything. And being able to put that all together, it's like anyone who likes a challenge or a puzzle, this is a great opportunity. This is a huge challenge or a huge puzzle. And it's exciting for people who like, whenever you're talking about, planning my stops and planning the route and I get super excited. When I'm planning a trip, whenever I'm going through the details, I'm like just as giddy as I am on the day where I'm about to go ride. It's just, it's fun, Yeah. So I think that's definitely one of the, and I do want to say that this episode isn't about climbing. This episode is about you. You happen to climb. And I think there is a lot of crossover. And it's my podcast. We can talk about whatever we want to.
Perfect.
But we've talked about climbing a decent amount on the podcast. I think there's a lot of crossover. We all just like getting outdoors and experiencing nature, pushing ourselves. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. We just happen to talk about bike packing mostly here. All right. I'm ready to talk about Doom if you are.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to read what Andrew Onermaa put on his website as the description of Doom. A beautifully and evil bikepacking route in the South, averaging 110 feet of elevation gain and loss per mile. Riders are either buckling up for a rowdy descent or gritting their teeth for a tumultuous climb. A torturous climb. Sorry, the computer's kind of far away from me. The loop consists of 85% gravel, 15% pavement, with surface types ranging from hard packed gravel to unmaintained HOV trails. Creek crossings, cutty connectors, and a few Arkansas high country classics. This route has it all. 378 miles with a whopping 41,000 feet of elevation gain. The resupply runouts are huge, and cell phone service is mostly non-existent. Before you completed your FKT, only 3 people had finished this route. It's called Doom for a reason. This is a hard route. What put it on your radar, and what made you want to, pack up your car and drive 13 hours? I Googled it. It was from Boulder to Oark. It's 13 hours, something like that. And do this event. Yeah. What attracted you to it?
Yeah, totally. I'd been wanting to get out to Arkansas to do some riding ever since I'd first heard about the high country. But the high country, it always kind of comes at like a bad time of year for me. Like October, I feel like after kind of like raging all summer, I'm usually like my body just kind of stops. It's like, okay, let's just pump the brakes.
I think your definition of raging is different than like a 25-year-old. I'm just going to say.
Yeah, probably.
You mean raging in the outdoors on like athletic endeavors and stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Just for any kids listening that don't know.
Yeah. Just a little translation. But anyways, so I've been, intrigued by the area ever since I heard about the high country race. And then Doom came on my radar actually after Brett did it back in January, which I still, after riding the route, I'm just still even more impressed than when I first heard that he had done it in January, because of just the conditions, the water, managing your body temperature in that weather. Anyways, kudos to Brett, because that was crazy. But
and I do want to note, for my own self, because whenever I said on the I don't know if you heard about the podcast, I announced that you would be the next guest, and I was like, I gave a little dig to Brett, and I was like, and she smoked your time, buddy. All in love and fun, but it is. I should mention, and we should mention, he was on a single speed, and
Of course.
yeah, the conditions were a little bit different or whatever. But yeah, you put like 24 hours into his time, something or 22 hours, something like that.
Something like that. But no, I mean, like Brett said, he went out and did it when he was able to go do it, you know? And so I think that that's like super impressive. And he was really supportive while I was out there. He like sent me some really nice messages, and we actually like talked briefly on the phone when I was driving back, which was really nice. One, because, breaking up the drive, and two, he's just like a super quality human. But anyways, so yeah, I heard about it after his attempt, and it's funny actually. Originally, my boyfriend Tony and I had thought we might go out in early April and ride the route in opposite directions as like individual time trials, like on our own, which would have been kind of fun.
Yeah, that would have been really cool.
But we both just got like super busy. Like we had traveled like already a good bit. We had like family going on. It just wasn't a good time. And then so we kind of just like let it slide. And then I'm actually signed up for the XL at Unbound this year.
I'll be there too.
Oh, nice. For the last few weeks, the XL has just been kind of like weighing heavy, like on my mind. And I am excited. I'm quite excited for it, but I've never done. Go ahead.
I think you were about to explain, but what part of it has been weighing on your mind?
Yeah, well, I think the XL is so interesting because, obviously it's not a bike packing race. Nobody's on loaded bikes, you're not sleeping, but because it, for most people, stretches across that 24-hour mark, it feels like, you really have to ride your own race in order to maintain a pace that's going to feel like sustainable for you. And I guess, just to put it plainly, like I'm a little worried about like getting, caught up in like going out too hard, trying to stay with people, and then totally blowing up. That, and of course, the very daunting fact that I'm going to ride my bike for like 350 miles or, whatever the exact distance is this year. So in this sort of like roundabout way, I felt like I needed to go out and just like have like a personal challenge that was outside of like direct competition that would obviously would serve as good training, but also would just kind of like get my mind right of like, okay, like you can kind of stick something out that's like really tough, like on your own. And also just know that like I was just out there like for myself. So
was like learning how to, you mentioned pacing. Were you paying attention and like trying to say, okay, I'm out here by myself. This is my pacing. This is where I need to be. And so whenever you go into a competitive environment, you can have that to kind of like fall back on, like remember?
Well, no, because I mostly ride alone or like I either ride with Tony or I ride alone. Like I don't do a lot of group rides anyway.
So your pace pretty well.
I know my pace pretty well.
Okay.
No, it was mostly just sort of like the mental side of it of like, in this weird way, it's like I went out and did Doom and I was really happy with like how I did. I felt proud of like my effort. And so now it's like, I feel like the XL, I can just go into it with this feeling of like, it's just another long ride, and I do think it was a good reminder though, too, of like, I guess it just kind of like reaffirmed that going into the XL is just like, you just kind of have to like follow your own instincts. And if you feel like you can hang with like some people at the beginning, like that's great. Like maybe try to do that. But if you can't, a lot can happen in 24 hours. You
are competitive though. I can tell.
Well, if I don't feel like I did my personal best, then I get hung up. I get hung up on that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's so much about, oh, I need to be better than this person. It's like, I want to feel like I'm doing like my personal best.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I've always felt like no matter what it is in life, right? Like you have to lay your head down at your pillow every single night and you have to be accountable to yourself and feel good about what you did. And that's really the only feeling that matters, right? At least to me.
Exactly.
And it's, you and the other thing is like you're the only person that knows if you could have given more, And so like you have to be accountable to that afterwards too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Doom is obviously a challenging route. It's also fairly close in distance to XL, Unbound XL. Was the mileage kind of a factor in your decision too?
No, just because I knew that the miles in Doom would be so much slower than the XL. I do think that, the Doom I think the terrain is quite different from the XL. Like maybe the XL has like a third of the climbing that Doom has. And the climbs that I've experienced in Kansas are much shorter, just like 2 minutes, a minute kind of thing. And also like the riding surface, at least from what I've seen on the 200 course. Yeah, sure. There's like some techier, like 2-track sections, but generally it's a little bit more like hard pack and like fast gravel. Whereas Doom was not that way. I think really it was wanting to do something that, I had to commit to. I mean, obviously if you drive 13 hours somewhere, it's going to take a lot for you to bail on the route.
And you went alone, right? I mean, there was no media, no one. I mean, when you finished, I saw you just took a picture of your bike in the parking lot. Like that was it. So, yeah.
Well, to be fair, I do work with Renee Hurst, the tire company. And so on my way out, I called Jan and told him that I was going and that it'd be cool if I wrote a story for Bicycle Quarterly afterwards. So for the second half of the second day, that photographer who shot Brett, Kai Caddy, he came out onto the course and found me. And he spent about 7 hours just like leapfrogging, with me. Yeah. But other than that, yeah, I was solo.
Can we talk about media real quick since it's been coming up?
It's hot water here.
Well, my only question about it was you doing an ITT and having like a photographer show up. Uh-huh. Did that have an impact on you? Did it annoy you? Did it motivate you? Was it just nice to see somebody? I mean, what I'm learning, everybody has their own interaction with people. And so it's kind of like an individual thing. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm also like the media guy. Like when Kai was out there doing Brett, I was also on course photographing Brett. And this is something I'm about to, this podcast is going to come out on Wednesday, the 11th. And then I'm leaving on the 12th to drive up to Gravel Doom and cover the event.
For the start. Yeah. For the race. Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the second afternoon. It was super hot. It was around 3 or 3:30 or something. And I'm just kind of like slogging up like this climb. And I knew that Kai was going to try to get some shots, but we had very little contact, mostly because it was like so last minute. I was basically like, hey, here's my tracker. Like, you know where to find me.
Plus no cell service. He couldn't call you even if he wanted to.
I don't think he even has my phone number. Yeah. But at the same time, as, it's part of my, my contract with Jan at Renee Hurst to submit something for BQ, one article a year, which as a writer, I'm happy to do. And I'm, excited about like telling the story. So I understand like why he wanted a photographer to come and like find me at least for like a handful of shots on the course. Because, like my iPhone photos like aren't going to look super great, like blown up in a print magazine.
No.
So anyways, yeah, Kai he finds me as I'm just like slogging up this like 10% climb. And I only know it's him or I hope it's him because I just see this guy with like a really big lens, like sticking out the window of like a car that's pulled over. And, so we had really little contact, while I was riding. You know, he would just kind of drive ahead for like a ways, stop, take a photo as I passed, and then go on. And at one point he said like, "Oh, and I'm Kai, by the way." I was like, yeah, I was hoping that you were.
So good.
And then when I got to that store, it's called like the Red Lick Country Store, where I ended up stopping that night because of my electronics. He hung out there maybe, I don't know, 45 minutes, just kind of trying to wait to see like what I was going to do, like if I was going to keep riding or not. And so he did get some shots of me there, like reorganizing everything on my bike and cleaning my chain and stuff. But, you know, I could tell he was trying not to be like intrusive, like in the situation. And so I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of debate about this, but if people want publications like Bicycle Quarterly or like Bikepacking and like the Radivist to exist, Bikes are dead. Well, you're not as visual of a medium.
No,
as
I'm
they
working
are.
on it. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I just got my new camera. Check this out.
Oh,
Yo,
oh wow!
Yeah, that's
look at
nice.
that.
I got a big ass lens for it too. I'm ready. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm just.
Well,
I'm
I'm just
excited about my
saying that,
camera.
like, I think that the media, that these outlets reflect what people seem to want, you know, and that seems to be coverage of things like this. So, and also I think during an ITT is different than during an actual race, but I think it's cool the way that you and Kai are just going to go shoot like the whole race, you know, versus like, you're not there for like a specific person. Although, I mean, I think that's fine too. Like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I think people just need to relax a little bit.
I think relaxing can be good. I'm on the
I don't know.
side of relax. Where I think this is all gonna pan out is we're gonna figure out a way for everybody to do whatever they want to, and it's gonna be okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really okay. I think we'll all be able to do what we want, and if you want to, you know, like what you did was really impressive, and it is a special thing to like just have this internal commitment with yourself that I'm going to drive 13 hours. I'm going to do something very hard. And I mean, yeah, maybe a guy will like come up and like take a few pictures of you like one afternoon or whatever. But I mean, you're going to finish in the dark by yourself with no fanfare. I mean, you know, there's something very, I always say romantic, but it's like very appealing, very cool. It's badass. It's
thanks. I just think that, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to do bikepacking races that, you know, where maybe somebody's meeting me at the finish, or like the XL, there's going to be tons of people at the finish, and like that will be really special in its own way too. But for me, with like the intent of this trip was just to like test myself, you know, mentally and physically, by doing this thing that I thought was going to be really hard for me. And so it felt appropriate that it was like just me at the end. That to say, if Tony had been able to come, like I would have been so psyched to see him at the end, you know, but like,
yeah,
that's just how it was. So
it's all good. All of it is good. I think that, you know, that's where I land. Like it's all good.
No, I really like what you said.
It's just different.
And I think Lael said a similar thing when she spoke on your podcast not too long ago. Like, yeah, people can just go do what they want, you know, and however you want to do it, I think is okay.
Yeah. No, I think these conversations, I hope are good. I hope, yeah. My hope is just that we learn how to with anything in life, you have to be able to talk and communicate about it. You have to understand the other side. You have to understand where they're coming from. I mean, you're in a relationship with Tony. Like, if he comes at you with a problem, you have to ask him, okay, where's this coming from? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see your point of view. This is where I'm coming from, and this is why I acted this way or whatever. And that's what we do to solve problems. And I just feel like that's all we really need to do is just like talk about it a little bit, figure it out. But I mean, we're talking about bike packing, so it's like, calm down. Calm down.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on. What were your goals going into this? Well, you've touched on some of them, obviously, with getting ready for Unbound XL, but specifically, was the time a major consideration? Were you going for the FKT?
Well, I just think, so in full transparency, like, I think if Brett came back out, now, in similar conditions to I had, I think he would go faster because, first of all, in January, you have so much less daylight. Obviously, like the temperature aspect and, how uncomfortable it could be to be like riding as late into the night as I rode. So I don't know if it's really so much as I thought that I wanted like to go after the FKT. It's just that I thought that the route could go faster under these conditions.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Very diplomatic and also accurate. The one thing that Brett was dealing with that you didn't have to deal with is all the water crossings. And I was out there whenever he was doing it. It was like 14 degrees at night. I mean, it was legit cold. Yeah. So I appreciate your diplomatic answer. And that's the kind of interesting thing about ITTs. And another debate that you sometimes hear online is like, ITT FKT versus a Grand Start FKT and like all these delineations between those. But I mean, the course is there, the route is there. And you made a good point. It's like Brett went when he could, and you had a gap in your window and you went when you could. And yeah, like you said, the time wasn't, well, actually you were saying this isn't much as like going after Brett's time. It's just like the course could be done faster. The course could be done
faster and
with better conditions. Yeah,
of course. And I mean, unless the conditions, unless they get a lot of wind or rain or something like that, I fully expect somebody in the race like could totally beat my time. I think that's like what's fun about these things is like the more repetition like a route gets, it's just really, at first it seems like, oh, wow, like that was so fast. And then somebody else kind of has this like goalpost, and it's always easier to push yourself when you have like a goalpost, I think. So yeah, I mean, I think under the right circumstances, like maybe with my electronics not, or, with a dynamo or me not, having to faff around with my electronics so much, like I would have really loved to get like close to 60 hours. And I fully expect that there are people out there capable of going like much faster than that, even if everything goes well. At the same time, I do think that hitting the resupplies, people will have to be very strategic with that. So,
yeah. That's one of the hugest challenges and it's in his description, is the distance between resupplies. So let's talk about how did you train for this and how much prep did you do? You're very analytical. Like how much time? Oh, actually you said that y'all were even thinking about doing it back in April. So, I mean, you've had this has been on your mind for a while. In my mind, going into this podcast, I was thinking that this was kind of like a spur of the moment thing almost for you, but it sounded like maybe not.
Well, when we thought we were going to go do back in April and then we decided not to go, I didn't think about it for a few weeks. And then I was either planning on doing some kind of several day tour here in Colorado, or trying to go out to Doom to ride that as kind of like, I wanted to do something that felt pretty big, like 1 month out from the XL. And then, keep up a long ride, like every week for the next couple of weeks, and then start to kind of like taper back, like, most people do.
So tell us what a long ride is for you.
Just kind of depends. I feel like something that's been a little bit different for me this really since January. Well, instead of thinking about miles, I've been just thinking a little bit more about like time on the bike. Well, so I got a hardtail, Bear Claws hardtail mountain bike over Christmas.
Those are nice.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's still actually set up fully rigid because supply chain stuff, whatever. The fork just arrived like recently. I've just haven't had time to swap over the suspension fork. But so given that I got this new bike, Tony and I went out to California to the Stagecoach route in February. And we toured that route. I think we toured it over 4 or 5 days. I can't remember. We did like 75 miles a day. But it's like pretty slow riding.
I remember the picture from your Instagram. It was very rough in that maybe you highlighted the worst section, but it looked pretty rough.
It was one of the rougher sections for sure. But so that was kind of like, okay, let's come out of the winter slump, with like several days back to back. And then we spent some time with Tony's dad in Nebraska in March. And the riding out there is really good, but I find it to be like pretty tough. It's just like super punchy, like loose surfaces. So we got in like a couple long rides out there. And then we went out and did the White Rim in a day in early April in Moab. And then we got in like a long ride on the Colorado Trail. So, numbers wise, like the rides themselves maybe aren't the same kind of training that somebody else would do for the XL. But for me, like, it's like if the miles are like slow and hard, it's sort of just like the time is like what matters more than the miles if the terrain isn't equal. So
yeah, I agree. I think I should have asked that question differently. It is time on the bike because, I mean, if you're on a road bike, it's different than if you're on a mountain bike and doing single track. I mean, it's time on the bike that's really the main metric. Yeah. So is that how you train for Doom? It sounds like you just did a bunch of cool rides. Sounds like you're having fun and training all at the same time.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm actually like, I'm not that like structured with like my training program, like, I mean, I don't have a program really. I just like, I try to do like one long ride a week. And then, like I was saying, I try to kind of keep in touch with running with, like maybe 2 runs a week, and then just kind of fill in the rest with like what makes sense based on the weather, based on like my schedule. Running is like way more time efficient. So if I have like a busier week work wise, maybe I'll run a little bit more. If I have a little bit more time, I'll get out on the bike. And it's just kind of like whatever you feel like you want to do. I don't know. I find that like for me, having my motivation there is really sort of like what matters most. I mean, sure. Yeah. There are days when you're just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to like go out and do something, even though I'm not really feeling it. But yeah, I feel like I get the most out of the things that I'm the most motivated on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And mixing up has to help keep it interesting and fun and not boring.
Yeah.
So on the route itself, was there anything that surprised you, was unexpected?
The dogs.
Don't come to Texas.
No, I feel like I'm going to scare all these racers, but man, there were a lot of dogs.
But you obviously didn't get bit.
I didn't get bit.
Maybe had some close encounters.
A couple close encounters.
It's always interesting. Why don't you tell people like what you do when you encounter dogs? Because we're all encountering dogs, and I know quite a few people have fears. I was with an ex-girlfriend when she got bit by a dog. I mean, it's part of the sport. So yeah, what's your strategy?
Oh yeah, I think I had like seen in some comment sections on some Texas route that bikepacking had posted about dogs. And I didn't
That's
even
why I
really
said, don't come to Texas, man. It's bad here.
Yeah. And I've heard other people say, this was echoed in that comment, but that usually just like a volley of water from your bottle, like either just in their general direction, or if the dog's really close to you, trying to like spray it in the face, like helps. So yeah, I kind of went back and forth beforehand. I was like, oh, am I gonna like carry anything extra? And ultimately I decided not to. So yeah, I mean, if a dog was coming up on me, I feel like usually you can tell how charged up a dog is when they're approaching, if they're just kind of trying to let you know, like, hey, this is my zone, or if they're actually like, seeming like they're going to be aggressive enough to like want to like, cause some harm. So for dogs that seemed particularly aggressive, for me, just like the spray of water always worked. They would immediately just kind of get like stunned, confused, and just like stop chasing me. Other times, if the dog seemed a little bit more like low key, like, territorial, but sort of like low key. And this, it's such like a squishy, like judgment. Sometimes I would just like slow down and be like, and like start talking, like, hey, I'm like not a threat, dog, and that works too. I think sometimes, especially because I would often pass through the zones where the houses were like right off of a descent, I'd be going like quite fast. So I think sometimes it was just really I was just startling the dog. Of course, you don't always want to take that chance of like, oh, maybe I just need to slow down, and it's like, oh, there's my ankle.
Well, the water is an interesting one because, my issue with that approach is, well, we should, in Arkansas, water is not a problem. Water is everywhere. And so it doesn't matter. You can squirt as many dogs as you want. But depending on where you are, that's not always an option if you're wanting to conserve your water. But yeah, I think talking to them is a good way to find out. And I've always said, I'm like, man, if it's too bad, just stop, because they're chasing you. So if you stop chasing, I put my bike, in between me and the dog, and I'll just walk. And I haven't had to do that too often, but anytime I get off my bike, it just de-escalates the situation immediately.
Yeah, that's another one I had heard, and it never got to the point where I felt like I needed to do that. But yeah, sometimes I would just really slow roll, through an area, and that seemed to help. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Tips for the high country from Hailey Moore.
For Doom.
Oh, for Doom. Yes. Thank you. Oh, man. It's funny having a podcast because, I have to edit myself, and I realize how many things that I say that are wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I say things wrong like I'll just switch up words or whatever.
Yeah. I probably won't even listen to this because I won't want to hear my responses.
I don't blame you. It's torture. It is torture.
Yeah.
I do not like my own podcast. Let's be very clear. Like,
no, you do a good job.
Well, I do appreciate it. And, I'm here because people do listen, and that's super cool. But I'm like anybody else. I don't want to hear myself talk. I don't want to hear myself stumble through ideas or what, it's like you want to just know exactly what you're going to say and say it right. But you listen to yourself, you're like, yeah, I said that, but I forgot to say this, and I didn't add that context. And anyway, we're all very self-critical, and I'm no different. So let's, where are we? Hold on. Let me get on my list. Okay, here's a good question. I'm going to give credit to this person because they had some good questions, and I think they should get credit because I'm about to use some of them. Where is that darn email? Gosh, dang it. Hold on. Oh, Tatiana Rogowski. Tatiana Rogowski. Do you know her?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, she's a big fan of yours. And shout out Tatiana, and thank you for sending in some questions. She heard you were going to come on the podcast from my last podcast, and she just reached out because sometimes I'll put on social media and ask for questions.
Oh,
but
wow,
so she
nice.
it is, it is nice. So one of her questions was, and I thought it was a really good one. You finished to an empty parking lot at what time did you finish, by the way?
I finished just before 10 p.m.
Okay. So 10 p.m., you're in Oark, Arkansas at Oark General Store in the middle of nowhere. And well, I don't even know if you have cell phone service, but her question is, who do you call? Who's the first person you call and why?
Oh, well, I called Tony. So the store has free Wi-Fi or has
that's what I thought.
Open Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I called my mom after Tony because she had texted me and was like, she's on the East Coast and she was like, I don't care what time it is when you finish, just give me a call. And so yeah, the two people I feel like who are most in my corner, that's who I called.
So when you called Tony, what was that like? Were you like, God, I'm glad this is over? Were you tears of happiness? What was that conversation like?
It's weird. It's like, well, okay. So actually right when I finished the route, I had just taken a photo of my dead bike picture in front of the sign. Right. That's what the bikes look like when they're laying on the ground, dead bike. And there was like kind of this anticlimactic moment where I had just picked my bike back up, and actually where you park your car for Doom is just, the equivalent of a block down the road, like in this field. So it's out of the way. And Andrew's gotten, clearance from whoever the property owner is to like leave cars there, which is great. But, man, this pickup truck of these two guys like rolled up right as I had finished. And, the guy like rolls down the window and he was just like, hey lady, you doing some motorcycling or whatever? And I was just like, oh, I'm actually wrapping it up for the day, thankfully.
Yeah.
And, he was just like, well, better be careful out here. And I was like, cool, dude, have a good night, and like, it was kind of enough of a reminder that like, yeah, I am in the middle of nowhere. And, I mean, to be fully transparent, I had so many positive interactions with people, along the route, like in Jasper and, at all the other stores that I stopped at, like in general, very warm, reactions from people. And, this reaction could have happened if I had been finishing a ride here in Colorado too. But it was enough of a reminder that like, yeah, I am alone and like nobody is here. And also, I find usually after long efforts like that, when you're really low, like calorically, I'll get cold like really fast, like, shivering like really fast. So it was kind of like this like snap back to reality of like, okay, go get the car, change clothes, put on a jacket. My phone was also almost dead. So that there's like a little covered picnic area right next to the store, where I like immediately plugged in my phone. And so it wasn't really until after I had done those like handful of things, I moved my car like back over to where the store is so that I could charge my phone for a few minutes. It wasn't until after I had kind of taken care of those like necessities that I like called anybody. And then when I called Tony, yeah, it was just, he was so supportive, like he had been texting me like on the final climb, even though I wasn't getting the text. And he is just being really sweet and congratulatory. And I was kind of wanting to give like the play-by-play, but I also felt this urgency to like pack my bike up and just kind of like move along. There's a really great campground called the Bird Adventure Center about 10 miles maybe away. And I had stayed there the night before I started. So I knew that I was going to go take a shower there afterwards as well. So yeah, it's kind of different when you finish alone because, you can't just kind of like fall into the car and like somebody's going to like handle you or like take care of you,
Yeah.
like I was still a little bit like in go mode until I got to the campground and got a shower and like crawled in the back of the car.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially knowing that there's a couple dudes rolling around in a truck that know you're in the parking lot by yourself at 10, 11 o'clock at night in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's just like, I mean, listen, I've been approached, I was at like 2 o'clock in the morning at a church looking for water, and some drunk redneck rolls up in his truck and shines his light on me. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" You know? And I was like, you have to explain what you're doing, to a drunk redneck at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not a comfortable feeling for anybody. I've never been a woman. I would imagine it's less comforting if you're a woman.
Yeah, I've never been a man, so I can only, I can only say it was uncomfortable for me. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that, let me ask you this question. I think it's an important one. I always like to get women's perspectives because I'm not one. How do you manage, maybe you don't have fears, but like, how do you manage your fears and anxieties about solo travel as a woman? How do you manage these encounters to feel as safe as you can?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, I definitely do, think about things like the fact that I'm a woman, unfortunately, sort of means that you do have to just be a little bit more mindful. It's weird. Like I've had this thought before where it's so interesting that like when I'm riding totally alone, and to clarify, I've never really ridden anywhere that's like grizzly country. So that would be an exception to like feeling afraid when I'm alone. And, mountain lions here in Colorado is just sort of like, well, I don't think that like I could be attacked by a mountain lion when I'm running, it's like, not really going to be very different on the bike. It's just sort of like a freak thing that if it were to happen, it was going to happen. But
it's people that are the scariest.
I know. And that's
it is
such a
people.
Shame.
It's not nature. Yeah. It's not nature.
It's such a shame that is what feels the most insecure. I do ride with an inReach. So there's always that, like going into Doom, it did give me peace of mind that I knew that like, at least Andrew was like in the area and like had my link, but I think the other part of it though, is like, I have done a lot of riding where, I think this was like the first time that I'd had any kind of unsettling interaction. So I think I try to remember like that balance of like the scales, where it's like most people, I think, A, either don't care at all what I'm doing or B, want to talk to me about it. So yeah, I think it's just kind of trying to like remind yourself of all the times that like nothing has happened. But at the same time, at night, like obviously I take a little bit more precaution. Obviously things could happen during the day, but I think at night, you just assume if somebody's out late or like whatever, you kind of like question their motives. And so I will try to like be less seen at night, like I always try to sleep where, I make sure nobody is like can see where I'm sleeping, or like if a car comes by and I'm kind of like getting myself sorted to sleep, I'll like turn my headlamp off, until they're gone, that kind of thing. So like, just like being like aware, I think goes a long way. Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to echo what you said because I have, over the years been able to talk to a lot of women who have done solo self-supported, whether it's bike touring or racing or riding, whatever. And I've asked this question a lot because I know that it's a fear on a lot of, in particular to women, this is a fear that they have and a barrier to entry for, solo expeditions. And what I've heard over and over again is that those negative interactions are pretty rare. I've never heard of like a really bad one. I've heard of some kind of like, ooh, that was kind of creepy. Maybe that didn't rub me the right way. But, I think that's a good perspective to have it. And while you were talking, it reminded me of like my own relationship with riding a bike and cars, and the knowledge that I could get hit by a car. I'm on the losing end of that every single time, or there's a mountain lion, or there's whatever, right? And all those things are options, but you have to like put it in perspective and be like, okay, but I'm 42 years old. None of those things have ever happened.
Right.
So,
and also like, I don't know, I want to live my life.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Don't be bound by your fears.
Yeah. And like, I think, or I hope that, some of the people that I did cross paths with when I was riding in this area had kind of the opposite reaction maybe. And they're like, oh, like, this is cool. Like, and I just feel like small interactions like that are often what's needed. Like personal interactions are what's needed to kind of like shift perspectives, not like, these really abstract things that you hear about like far away or like in the news or like whatever. It's the stuff that happens to you like close to home.
Thank you for saying that. That's been a fun thing for me. I host a race called the East Texas Showdown.
Right.
And and this year we had people from all over. Last year we had people from all over, and every single, person from out of state almost talked about how their perception of what they were walking into and the reality of what they were walking into was so far separated, And it was nice. It's like nice. It's like, I know Texas has its shit. I've lived here my whole life, but I mean, it's not all bad, and it's nice for people to come here and be like, oh my gosh, everybody was so friendly. The cars got out of the way, blah, blah, and like, I wasn't expecting that, and you're right. Like we need those like personal interactions. They are the most impactful. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I have a question from Andrew Onermaa.
Oh.
I had to give him a chance to weigh in here. His only question, actually, he wanted to know about the multiple disciplines and how that impacted, but that was already on my list. But he wants to know about how the technical sections on the North to South Colorado race / ride, whatever, are similar or different to gravel dune.
Yeah, I know. I thought about that.
And he's asking for selfish reasons because he's signed up and he's only looking for beta.
Yeah. No. So in general, I think there are definitely more fast miles on north south. And it's kind of like with Doom, there was kind of this, this like minimum, like with the terrain, like the terrain was kind of, or this like threshold with the terrain, like the terrain was like basically always like kind of slow. And then there would just be, because like the surfaces, I think maybe because there have been some recent moisture, the surfaces were like fairly soft, and then there would be, small to like kind of ball bearing, like golf ball size, like gravel on like some sections of the course. So especially when you're climbing, you just feel like you're working way harder to gain traction than if you're just climbing like hard packed gravel, which I think more of Colorado is like that. Also, I felt like the technical sections in Doom, they were a little bit more just like kind of sprinkled throughout the course. Like, sure, there was a handful of sections that would like last for like several miles if you're on like an OHV trail or something like that. But generally they were a little bit more kind of sporadic and like shorter lived, but maybe more frequent. Whereas in north-south, you can kind of outline where the technical sections are. I mean, there have been a couple of changes to the course this year, but there's this one iconic pass that you go over called Rollins Pass that goes up to like 11K. And then when you descend on the other side, oh my gosh, it's like you want like a mountain bike, it's like super loose, big rocks, like Jeep road, but once you're done with it, like that's like the technical section, you're back to like fast gravel. So I would say in general, North South has a lot more fast miles, and maybe there's more disparity between what's technical and like what's not technical. I do know though that this year the race director Mark has added in like a 10-mile section of single track, which is actually, it's a really cool section of single track. I've ridden it a few times. And it's like easy mountain biking terrain, so on like a loaded gravel bike, like you'll be fine. I think aside from the first like steep punch to sort of like gain the ridge that the trail follows, I don't even think you have to hike any of it really. So yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it, is that there's a clearer delineation in north south between like, oh, this is like kind of techie, and then like going back to like kind of like the fast stuff.
All right, Andrew, I hope that was the answer you were hoping for.
You can continue.
It pays to know the podcast host. Yeah. You can get personal questions on there. Yeah. All right, Hailey. So like I said, this episode is going to come out on Wednesday, the next day. We got 40 something people that are going to be taking on the Doom route that you just set a new FKT on. And I think there might be a couple of them that might listen to this podcast. I hope that they do. What is, and maybe you don't want to actually, now that I'm like asking this question, I realize you might not want to give advice to people who may be trying to take away your FKT. No, but I also have the feeling that you don't care. Yeah.
Like if somebody's faster than me, like, I don't feel like my advice is going to be the deal breaker. And at the same time though, like the whole point of doing these things is to like share the experience. I mean, there was some decisions I made going into the course, going into the ride, that I would not have made if, folks like Andrew and Dylan Morton hadn't been willing to like give me insights into the course. So yeah, I think that paying it forward is the only way.
I think so.
Yeah.
What is your advice? What are your takeaways from the Doom route that you think? This may be a good way to answer it. What would you do differently? How would you approach it differently? I don't know.
Well, I hope everybody's running a Dynamo hub, first of all. That's number one. Otherwise, though, no, I was pretty happy with what I did strategically. I mean, I would say that, so I don't know if we touched on this, but I actually, on the way out there, like when I got to Bentonville, I picked up a different pair of pedals at a bike shop. Shout out Joe's Bike Shop. I got, like the platform on one side, clipless on the other. And I picked up a pair of sandals because I was worried about the creek crossings. And so Dylan had told me that he thought that in some sections there might be like multiple crossings in quick succession. So I was like, okay. And it's, it's such a hassle to like change shoes, especially because my bike shoes are lace up. So I was like, well, if I have, the option to ride platform pedals, I can just put on sandals when it seems appropriate, and then just like ride for a while and like let my feet dry naturally. And like, also maybe if I cross any more creeks, like in the next like 10 minutes or something, I'll have a better idea of when is an appropriate time to like change back into my regular riding shoes. And I'm really glad that
you kind of time it when you were going to like take a break anyway. Maybe, you're like, okay, I'm going to stop for 5 minutes and swap shoes and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, okay, I've been riding for like 15 minutes. My feet are dry. I haven't found another creek. So like, go ahead and change shoes. So that was.
Did you, I have to ask, I'm sorry, but did you ever like put your shoes back on and then immediately after, soon after there was a creek crossing?
One morning that happened. And then I would just try to I was like, screw this. Like, I'll just walk through barefoot. But then like the rocks were like really slippery on the bottom. So I was just like, oh, maybe the sandals would have been worth it. But yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of tedium in that way. But otherwise, I would just say, related to that, like folks should definitely try to keep their feet dry. And then also just like know what the hours are on the resupplies. And then, so when you get to one and you're like, okay, it took me this long to cover this many miles, and the next place is this many miles away. Like, am I going to make it? Or should I kind of like double up here so that I don't get stuck having to wait for this place to open?
Yeah, really prioritize and be thoughtful about every resupply point, essentially.
Yeah. It's,
you got to know how far you're going to go and how long it's going to take you.
Yeah.
And would you err on the side of maybe carrying a little bit more food than normal?
I definitely started with a lot of food because I wasn't sure, like I didn't want to go in with any assumptions. I ended up making it to Jasper before 5 p.m., which was awesome because then I just like ate dinner there. But I didn't want to assume that that would be a possibility. So I started with a lot of food, which was fine. I mean, it's just like, I don't think it weighed that much more. But yeah, I guess I would probably err on the side of carrying a little more than I typically do, just because the miles, they were slower than, I don't know what you want to call your average riding, because that doesn't mean anything, but
they're slow. They're slow, hard
miles. Yeah. So the last thing you want to do is like run out of food. So,
yeah, I'm curious to hear you being literally only one of 4 people on planet Earth that have completed this route. What are your overall impressions? What are your takeaways?
Yeah, it's a cool route. Definitely a burly one. My favorite sections were, I really enjoyed the section of riding to get to Jasper. It's actually one of the wetter sections on the route, but anytime you're just by the water there, it was like, I thought was like really cool. It's a really lush route. And the terrain was definitely more engaging than I expected it to be. And there is a lot of up and down, like through the trees, but then you kind of have some more like distinct sections later on in the route. Like I think the furthest eastern boundary, you go through this area along Richland Creek, and that kind of felt like its own zone. And then like further south, this section around White Rock, which was like this really big climb, kind of felt like its own section. So there was some repetition in like the terrain, but also like these like distinct chapters that made it cool.
That's actually a really good description because it can, I don't want to use the word mundane, but it's like it's just kind of the same thing. It's like up and down, lots and lots of trees and river crossings. Like there's a lot of that,
yep. But
then it's broken up into some more distinct and more defining things that I guess probably make it interesting, a little more fun.
Yep.
Yeah. A little more engaging. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. What other events after Unbound XL are on your radar, if all? Are you thinking that far ahead?
I really haven't. Part of it,
that's okay.
Part of it is I should be finishing up this online school program that I've been doing in the next few weeks. So I kind of wanted to give myself like a little bit of like a mental break after that and just to kind of do whatever I felt like doing. I might do the north south again. I haven't decided yet.
There you go, Andrew. Maybe you can race her.
I have a really good friend here in Boulder. She and I she's a big runner. So she and I have been kind of scheming some like mountain objectives together this summer. She's in the process of completing her PhD program at CU Boulder. And, I'm really afraid she's going to move away. So we kind of wanted to like, do some fun stuff together in the mountains this summer. Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, there's so much to do here in Colorado. In the summertime, it's like my absolute favorite time to be here. So I typically don't like to get too far from home in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a good spot there.
As long as
being in Texas here, I might actually. This is a perfect segue because I was going to ask you. I mean, for the listening audience, I had contacted Tony about coming up to Colorado this summer and meeting him. There's a couple other people that I'd like to snag some interviews with when I'm in town. So hopefully you and we get a chance to meet. Hopefully we can make that happen this summer. But let's say I come up this summer, where do we go? Where like if we go do like an overnighter on a bike ride, where do you go? Where's the spot you take me?
I really love Salida.
Yeah.
Salida is a great town, and right out of town you can hop on the Divide route, and Marshall Pass is like, it's one of my favorite passes in the state. Maybe because the first time I rode it was like during aspen season, so like it was just like golden. So I have really special memories from Marshall Pass. But I think Salida or Buena Vista would both be like great like staging areas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
How far away is that from Boulder?
Salida. Oh, how far is Salida? So funny. I feel like I usually get there by bike instead of driving.
Well, that's good.
Like,
that's a good answer.
Like 2 hours, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we can make that happen. I need to probably start planning something. I do like to plan, but my life is too hectic and crazy to. I'm just like, I said this recently on one podcast, like it's like whack-a-mole. I just feel like, things just keep piling up, and I'm like, I'm not really getting ahead. I'm just like doing this all the time, and so it's like, oh shit, I got to go do this. I got to go do that. And it'll get better. It'll get better.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
I am looking forward to hopefully making that happen. And I really, really enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed getting to know you, and I know you've like downplayed your FKT a little bit, but I was really excited by it, and I was really happy for you. And I thought it was, I just thought it was badass.
Aww.
I mean, I know how hard that route is. I know how tough it is. I know the conditions. I mean, I know the roads. Doing what you did was a real strong effort, and I will congratulate you on a job well done. And I was over the moon for you, and I'm really happy that you agreed to come on and share some of your time with me.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick. And and I really enjoyed this too. I really appreciate you inviting me on. So,
are you happy with your FKT?
Yes, I'm happy. I'm happy with my ride. Yeah.
Good. What are your, I actually had one other question that I kind of forgot about earlier. And so before I wrap it up, what motivates you to enter a race? Or, because from talking to you, I've learned that, you like to tour, you like to go do this, you like the laid back stuff and just enjoying nature. But it seems like every once in a while you're like, I gotta chase that whatever or something, like what's going on there?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I really love bike touring. Especially with Tony, it's just such a nice way just to like kind of check out and like feel really present. But a hard effort, it's just kind of this like punctuating experience. And it forces you to be present in a different way than touring, because you really don't have like the capacity. I mean, to be fair, I've only done 2 bikepacking races, by the way, like, just to put that out there. So I'm not like some great expert, but, in my experience, any hard effort, whether it's the Unbound, like 200, or, for me, the North South, or the ITT on Doom, if you're really going for it, you don't really have the capacity to like think about anything else. And in a weird way, like that is kind of like meditative in itself. But also I think it's really rewarding to like, to just go out and like give something, kind of everything that you've got. Like, and I know that not everybody is motivated to do that. And I think that's totally fine. But whatever it is for me, just really pushing myself, it just feels like this crazy like growth like experience that nothing else really comes close to. And in some ways, like, I mean, obviously you're the same person afterwards, but you feel like you've had more change in whatever that finite amount of time is than like the last year of your life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it also forces you to confront some things like about yourself. Like for me, I find if my motivation isn't pure, I guess, for like lack of a better word, or if I'm not like intrinsically motivated, I will have a much harder time like mentally with something. So yeah, I don't know. I think like the personal challenge and like growth element that you get out of it. And also just like the whole, and it sounds cliche, but like, taking on like the unknown is a very rewarding thing when you come out the other side and everything went okay. It's like a very like self-empowering feeling.
1,000%. Solo self-supported. You did it yourself. You tackled all those challenges, all those hurdles, and you did it.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, you fail, then you learn something, you come back and you do it again,
exactly.
And that's part of the process too.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. My curiosity is, you've only done 2 races, and that's kind of what I think I was kind of wanting to get at, is like, is this the sign of more Hailey to come on the bikepacking racing circuit? Do you see yourself like leaning more into these bigger efforts, these races, or are you just kind of like winging it and you'll go by whatever you feel like doing?
I mean, I definitely like, I enjoy the sport, for sure. I guess I'm just always really careful about like, like some people, I don't know how they race so much every year. And I don't know if it's just like, oh, it gets easier, like mentally or like whatever, but I'm always just a little bit worried about, burning myself out. So I guess that's kind of another part of it, is like kind of always wanting to like check that motivation. And it's like, oh, do I really feel inspired to do this? Or do I just feel like there's a lot of hype around this thing, and so like I should go do it? And I mean, the hype's not a bad thing, it's like how people get excited about stuff. But yeah, I definitely see myself doing like more events. But I don't know what that looks like in the immediate future.
Yeah. So you're not looking to take down Lael anytime soon.
Oh my gosh. I'm not looking to take down anybody.
That's good. Good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This sport is so, it is selfish, and I think that's okay. Whenever I did my East Texas Showdown, I said like, in our lives, like there are times where we need to be, giving to your partner. You need to be like focused on work, and you need to like focus on your kids or whatever. But you also need and deserve the time to focus on yourself and to do something selfish. And that's kind of where bikepacking comes in, because you're not doing it on a team. You're not supposed to have any support. This is about you having internal struggles, internal dialogue with yourself, being alone, and then finding out, like answering that question, what can I do? What am I capable of doing? And as I've talked to you, what I hear is that that's the most thing you're looking to like answer is like, you're just out there like on a personal journey. You're doing what feels right. You're seeking out the things that make sense to you. And that's what you do. And as personal, it's a selfish thing. And I think it's okay. That's a part of your life that can be that, you know, and I think it's good personally as a bikepacking podcast host.
Thanks. Yeah. I think that's basically how I'd sum it up too. So.
All righty. I'm going to go be a dad.
Awesome.
All right. Tell Tony I said hi.
Will do.
Even though I don't know him, but I'm trying to suck up so I have a good interview.
I think you're in.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Okay,
have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye.
All right, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Hailey for coming on today's episode. And again, congratulations. I'm making it short and sweet. Got to get out the door. So y'all take it easy out there. Don't forget to support our sponsors, Athletic Greens and or Kuat. And if you'd like to support directly, you can sign up over at patreon.com/bikesfordeath. Love you lots. Now go ride your damn bike.
It was the middle of the night. You grabbed your knife and you held it tight. The sounds of beasts kept you awake. The sounds they made kept you afraid. In the morning, you packed your bike. Memories forgotten from the previous night. You rode faster than ever before. Was it your imagination? Or merely folklore? Fear turned into strength as you pushed further. Every pedal stroke, stronger and firmer. Your bike feels weightless, your legs aren't tired. You think to yourself, just a few more miles. Bikes. Oh, death. Bikes. Oh, death.